likely it was written at a time when David had time he was facing a big challenge in his life. There was a big situation in his life that had come up. Some say that it occurred when he was anointed king over Israel. Some say that it happened right when the Ark of the Covenant came back to Israel, and this psalm is one he penned it then. Hard to say, of course, exactly when. I believe to be written by David, but at an important time in his life. And a time where important, if you will, responsibility. Seems to me that the references here, David's making some decisions and he's writing them down. And let me just add this. Sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to make plans. You hear me a lot of times analyze yourself. You hear me say those kind of things. I've said before that sometimes it wouldn't hurt us to go through scenarios in our own minds and try to plan ahead how we would react to those. Wouldn't be a bad idea. And that's kind of, I think, what's going on here. I think David, if it was written when I suspect it was, just as he was anointed king over Israel, I think he's sitting back and he's thinking about, okay, once I'm anointed king, now what do I do? And so that's kind of the thought process. Listen as we read, we'll read all 8 verses here real quick. It's a small little chapter, but listen to what David says. Verse number 1, I will sing of the mercy and judgment, unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. I will set no wicked thing before mine eye. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. A froward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Whoso privily slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. Him that hath an high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. Mine eyes shall not be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me. He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. I will early destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all wicked doers from the city of the Lord. Interesting the way David approached this. David's fixing to take on a huge challenge. If it was written, as I think, when he was fixing to become Israel, you have to understand Israel went through a tumultuous time before David became king. The King Saul, the first king anointed in Israel. And Israel had to transition from Samuel being in charge of them, the man of God, to now having a king. And instead of going to Samuel and Samuel going to God and get direction, now the Israel had chosen to take on a king and go to a human king. It was up to that king to make the decision whether to go to God for direction or to make the decisions himself. The first years of the nation of Israel with a king, Saul. King Saul was their king. Initially, it looked like Saul was a good choice, and Saul did go to God and God's man, but in quick, short order, Saul started making unilateral decisions. He made decisions based on what he felt and he thought without seeking God. He didn't go to God's man and say, okay, give me direction here. How should I do this? And it hurt him. It, in fact, cost him the kingdom ultimately because of the decisions he made. David was different than that. David had watched what had happened to Saul and had understood what was transpiring there. And Israel had gone through a time where it was successful, the first part of Saul's reign. But it wasn't long till things started happening that just started a question mark in your mind. And how was Israel going to continue with this Saul leading us? And David didn't want to fit into that category. David loved, and actually David, even though he was chased by Saul for much of Saul's reign, David was very loyal to King Saul, and David loved King Saul, and David wanted and tried to serve King Saul, even though King Saul was trying to kill him. That's a difficult situation, just telling you. If you work, have you ever been in a boss of somebody or had a boss over you that just didn't like you. You might like them, but the boss didn't like you. And you worked hard to please that boss, but that boss tried to do everything in his power to make you look bad, feel bad, and just want to go home. If you've never been in that kind of scenario, in that kind of situation, you won't understand this as well as those of us that have been. And you just, it's a frustrating position to be in. David did not want to follow suit where the way Saul did. David wanted to do differently. David wanted to behave differently. David wanted to walk differently. And so David sits down as he's entering this new phase of his life as king of Israel, and he wants to put boundaries around himself. He wants to limit what he can do or what he will allow himself to do. And that's why I say it'd be wise for us. We should take note of this. And when a situation comes in our lives, we ought to sit down. Jesus referred to as count the cost. We ought to sit down and lay out, okay, this is the direction I'm going. And yet when I'm going this direction, these are some boundaries that I am choosing now not to go. Now, let me make this statement also. Once those decisions are made, we need to stick to them. We sometimes and many times in our Christian life, we say, well, I'll never do that. And lo and behold, time goes by, situation comes, and we look back and we're doing exactly what we said we wouldn't do. We got to be careful of that. We've got to police ourselves. And I think David is doing that here in this psalm. He's trying to say, okay, these are the things that I'm going to do. First thing he says, verse number 1, I will sing of mercy and judgment unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. First thing he says is this is I will. This is I'm going to do this. I am going to sing of mercy and judgment unto the Lord. That word mercy is an important word. That word mercy is not giving someone what they deserve. It's giving you a break, giving you an out, giving an avenue of escape, if you will. And David's saying, I'm going to sing of the mercy and of the judgment. Now you say, well, what's judgment? Judgment is balancing the scale. Judgment is treating somebody right and balancing the scale. So David here is saying, okay, I'm going to emulate, I'm going to bring up the thought in my mind through song. I'm going to sing of what the Lord has done for me. The Lord has granted me mercy. I don't have to face hell because he made a way of escape. I don't have to. And not only that, but the Lord is fair. He's equal. He treats me, and even though sometime my wife and I the other day, we were talking and we were driving down the road, and there's an opening, a parking spot that was open, and I said, the Lord loves me. And she says, no, he loves me more because I asked for that place. I said, well, I asked for that place too. And she said, I know, but I saw it first. And so to her, it was God making over her. To me, it was God making over me. In reality, God took care of us. And God gave, you say, well, that's just a silly thing. You know what? If we would start looking at some of the silly things as God providing for us, it would make life a whole lot more easy to deal with. If we just start saying, okay, God took care of me. Wow. Because the problem we have is we pull up to a space that, oh, wow, good deal. Look how good I am. I got this space. Good heavens. And if we're not careful in short order, we'll start thinking we're pretty good. And just for the record, as soon as we start thinking we're pretty good, we're going to get ourselves in lots of trouble. And if you want to realize how much you need God, if you realize how much God gives you and blesses you and takes care of you and bails you out instead of letting you get what you probably should have gotten, the truth is that we would value God a whole lot more. So David here, heading into this new phase of his life, he starts off, says, I'm going to sing. I'm going to sing God's mercy. I'm going to sing of God's judgment. Then secondly, we see here in verse 2, another I will. If you he says, I'm going to, and look what he says, I will behave myself in a perfect way. Oh, when wilt thou come unto me? He says, I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. Now, I wish most of you here have been here on Wednesday night. You've heard me go through our little talk on Wednesdays and how we've used the prudent and the wise and the foolish and the scorner and tried to correlate them with how God really wants us to live our lives. And between the simple one and and wisdom is an individual, I think Proverbs puts in there, that's called the prudent one. Somebody trying to help direct you toward wisdom. And it's interesting where David says here in verse number 2, I will behave myself wisely. I looked up that word behave because I want to see what the word behave means. But the word behave isn't there. You have to actually include behave myself wisely. Those three terms together means to be prudent. It means David is saying here, he said, I'm choosing to be seeking wisdom in my life. I am choosing to seek wisdom. Where do we get wisdom? From the Bible. Where do we get wisdom? From the Lord. David's saying, I'm choosing to follow the Lord. I'm choosing to let him be my guide, is what he's saying here in verse number 2. We see, first of all, he says, I'm going to sing of these things, judgment and mercy. But then in verse number 2, he says, I'm going to behave myself. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to be seeking wisdom in my life and the lives of others. As I enter this new phase of life, I'm going to be seeking wisdom. And then thirdly, I see here another I will. He says there, I believe it's verse number 3. Yes, he says, I will, not verse number 3, second part of verse number 2. I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. Now, when you say that, if you make that statement and we interpret it the way we generally interpret perfect, we're going to think without sin. Unfortunately, in our human nature, in our human condition, we will never be able to be without sin. That word perfect does not mean without sin. That word perfect means complete. It says, I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. That means when I'm home, I'm going to be as good a person as I am when I'm at church. Boy, don't we need to hear that in Christian circles. When I'm treating my wife, I'm going to treat my wife the same way with the respect and care that I would treat a fellow church member in the church house. It's a crime that in many houses, many Christian homes, that the husband treats the wife as subservient human being, but they come to the church house and treat basic strangers with Christian respect. Well, I'm behaving like a Christian. Don't you understand? If you married a lady that's a Christian, if you'll go through the studies of the Apostle Paul and his teachings on how we're supposed to treat the brethren, you're going to find out most of us in our own home are failing miserably to live up to what Paul instructs us to do because we think, well, we don't have to behave that way. I'm not at church. I don't think he specifies at church, does he? If you read what he's saying, he's not. And so for how dare me marry my wife and then treat everyone in the church house a certain way and go home and treat my wife in a horrible way? That's a crime. Why do we struggle in our household so much? Because we forget and I'm telling you, when you start reading the Bible and seeing how Christians are supposed to treat each other, and then analyze how you treat your spouse or children inside the households, you're going to find that we're not really walking perfectly at home. At home, oftentimes, we're wandering around aimlessly, causing trouble, and treating behaving as a criminal in our own house, and then coming to church and putting on a facade. Can I just let you know, whether we like it or not, kids are very perceptive. That means they know what's going on inside of us. I don't know how many times my wife and I'd have an argument, behind closed doors argument. Of course, I was right, she was wrong, and until she got herself right, there was going to be problems in the household. And so when we were alone in the room, we might spat a little bit. I've told y'all this before. My wife gives me the silent treatment when she gets mad. When I get mad, I want to give her the silent treatment. I just can't. It's not really programmed inside of me. But I'll give her the silent treatment. The kind of silent treatment involves a lot of grunting, groaning, groaning, and eye rolls. All those seem to be involved in this. And so I will go into the room if it's just her and I, and we're agitated with each other. In front of the kids, we'll talk and communicate, but it's strained. And then when we get in the room by ourselves, usually it's like that, and a little bit of that going on. And you say, you wouldn't behave like that. I don't. My wife does. But and what we've learned, I remember one time we had, and I don't even know what it was about. Most of our fights, it's funny. Nettie, our littlest one, is probably the most frank with us. She's open and outright with her parents. As we've maybe it's because we're older. I don't know. Sam would say some stuff, but he get in too much trouble. He just stopped saying stuff because he's afraid to get in trouble. Nettie just blurts it out. But I remember Laura and I there was a rift between us, and I remember that we walked out, and Nettie was pretty little, 5, 6, 7-year-old, and she said, with both of us there, she's a pretty shrewd little girl, and she said, are y'all going to get divorced? You need to just get over this mess that you're going through. And she said it just blew. And it was a little kid saying that to Laura and I. And of course, guilt and conviction struck my wife's heart because she was run wrong. And no, both of us are like, what do you mean? Dad, we all know you're fighting. Y'all just going to have to get over it like that. And it's funny, as she's gotten older, we'll start bickering amongst each other. And now we bicker in front of the kids because they know it goes on. Why not just let them see it? And we bicker in front of them. And Nettie was in the back seat one time, and Laura and I were bickering. And it's real quiet after Laura and I got done. She's giving me the silent treatment. I'm giving her the sort of silent treatment. And Nettie's in the back there. It was quiet for a second. All of a sudden, I hear her say, both of y'all are just so petty. That's just a silly thing. Get over it. She said it like that, straight out. She's the baby of the family. She had no business talking to her dad and mom like that. But man, it was a petty thing that we were squawking about. The reality is, kids are very perceptive, and I've had parents that are going through an actual divorce and are convinced it's not going to bother the kids. And I've lived long enough to see that affects the kids. Keep your home right. That's what he's saying here. Keep your home right. He's saying, David's saying, I don't care how big I get in the kingdom, I got to keep the home life right. And my friends, we've got to keep the home life right. We got to keep our home operating properly. If there's a problem inside the home, fix it. We need to do our part. So first he says he's going to sing of judgment and mercy. He says, secondly, he's going to behave himself and be prudent, heading toward wisdom. Thirdly, he says, I'm going to walk within my house with a perfect or a complete heart. But then fourthly, there in verse number 3, he says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. Boy, a lot of wisdom there. Especially when it comes to the case of a man. I've never been a girl, so I don't know. I may be speaking out of turn. But I know how men are. And God has programmed us differently, I take it. And that's a good thing. But we men have to be careful what we set before our eyes. We men are obsessive beings. We become obsessive. And if we're not careful, we will put something before our eyes. The pornography world, do you know who it attacks? It doesn't really attack the females. Women aren't usually affected by it in a whole lot of ways. Men are. And men will become obsessive with that. But not just that. Men become obsessive with other things. Let me throw a couple other things out men become obsessive with. Men become obsessive, and I missed it. But there is a pocket age bracket right in my age bracket and below the video game world. Men can become obsessive with video games. Do I hate video games? No, but I don't like them a whole lot. Why? I don't know how to drive them. It's too many buttons, and this button jumps a guy, this button flips a guy, and this button, and Sam is forever, Dad, you need to work on this. I'm not going to work on this. It's not going to be something. Just because my thumb moves like this and that guy does this flip, that's not, I'm not working on that. Just not gonna. But some people do. I'm not insulting them, but what I'm going to say is that we men become obsessive about that. Men become obsessive about the news. Some of us men, I'm one of those, probably fit into that category. I can be obsessive about what's going on politically. I can listen to the talk radio. And if I'm not careful, it will control my life. And I will let it control it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. I can be obsessive in sports. Y'all know that. I'm a Cubs fan. Why? Because the Cubs are the best. That's a lie. But because the Cubs tripped over a couple of World Series wins in early 1900s, and then tripped over one in 2016, which I may never get to see again. Probably won't. But I will forever root for them. Why? Because that's how I'm obsessive about it. And I'll get watching the game, and my poor wife, she does everything else in the world but watch the silly game because I love to watch. I love sports. And I'll sit and watch it till I make her crazy. But we need to be careful what we're setting before our eyes. Fifthly, under there, verse number 4, it says, I will not know a wicked person. Now that sounds silly, doesn't it? I will not know a wicked person. But I looked up that word know, and that word know means to become. I'm not going to become a wicked person. What David is saying here is he's going to actively work to keep himself right. He's going to try to do what he's supposed to do. He's going to try to follow right. He's going to try to follow what he's supposed to do. And you could read verses 5 through 7, and you can see he put some other things under there to keep him from becoming a wicked person. Verse 5, whoso privily slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. He's not going to listen to dirty talk about his neighbors. Him that hath a high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. He's not going to hang out with a proud person. Verse number 6, a little letter B under there, if you want to put it. Mine eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, and they may dwell with me. He that hath that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me. In other words, he's saying, I'm going to put faithful people in. These are ways he's not going to be allowing himself to become a wicked person. A little letter C under there, verse 7, he that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. He's putting guidelines around himself so that he himself doesn't become a wicked person. And then sixthly, in verse number 8, I will early destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all wicked doers from the city of the Lord. He's trying to protect his nation. He's saying, I'm going to be actively searching and doing what I'm supposed to do and be in treatment of our nation. I've been saying since this election, I want us, I think we as Christians, this should be a wake-up call. The election, if it were stolen, the election was stolen on the local level. That's exactly where it was stolen. It wasn't stolen on the federal level. It was stolen in these local communities and local areas that haven't policed themselves and haven't protected themselves and made sure the voting process was done right, that their legislature in each state was put together properly. That's on a local level. And I'm telling you that even though we're in the Bible Belt here, we need to watch what's going on locally. Because what's going on locally obviously has an effect on the federal level. And it's up to us to get engaged and do our part. We need to take these, and that's what David's saying. He said, I'm putting myself in a box here. And I'm saying, I'm going to protect what God's given me to protect. And I'm going to watch myself and watch my home. I'm going to keep myself living right, keep myself doing right. And then in verse number 8, he says, not only that, I'm going to watch the nation. I'm going to make sure I do my job. Boy, what a tremendous little truths are found in this little proverb that often is overlooked, I'm afraid. But man, David lays it out pretty thick there. And David puts himself, if you will, on guard. And he says, these are the things I'm going to watch. Boy, it'd behoove all of us to take some of these principles and add them to our lives. Say, wow, this is some big deal stuff I need to pay attention to. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for David. I thank you for the life he led. Lord, I thank you for the wisdom that he gives us here in this little passage. I thank you for the insight that we get. Man after your own heart is what you refer to David as. Lord, we'd love for that to be referred to of us. And Lord, I think David gives us insight right here that would be a tremendous asset to each one of us. Lord, may we take time maybe through this week to sit down and open our Bibles and reread this little proverb and think on it for just a little bit. and ask ourselves the question, have I put the proper guidelines in my life so that I will properly be what I should be all the time? I pray that you'd bless us, Lord, as we go through this week. I pray that you take care of our church. We have a number of people sick, struggling with health issues. Lord, I pray that you'd meet those needs. I pray that you bless us as we go on our way through this week. Bring us back again to your house on Wednesday, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.